So just heads up, we don't have any printed material as far as agenda. I don't know if what Houston's got up, but we'll go through that. Partly, we're going to have some more material, but the city's been down a couple days, and I came here earlier and yesterday, and we, as a committee, agreed to work along with the processes. So we're going to have a meeting as normal. We have some content to go through, so we'll start it with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. We have our recording secretary had some minutes to submit, and she's not here tonight, so we're going to move on to that. We'll take care of all our normal business next month and catch up. We'll be running at 100% next month. So at this point, I have asked co-chair Houston Oldham to pick up the meeting for us and take us through some of these documents that have been submitted to the committee for their review. Co-chair?
Yeah. All right, so since we have a lack of paper, I'm trying to do something a little different with my computer today and extend my screen, so just bear with me as I kind of navigate through this. I'm going to be looking around and back, and then everyone here on the committee is also, going to have a bit of a different way of looking at this today than normal. All right, so over the past, I guess since the last meeting, the past 4 weeks, we had a timeline from the last meeting of receiving some documents from ETGD on or around the first week of September. So that would have been, about September 5th or 6th. We got these in a few days ago now, and so we're going to start with what is a subsection of Chapter 2's Natural Features and Cultural Resources. And this is like the historic preservation register, basically, but let me get, sorry, I'm working on my other screen here as I pull everything up. So as I look at historic preservation content here, what we're going to do now is go through the definitions of kind of what the purpose of this is, and then scroll through it, look at the content that's been added, and then make it to the bottom of it where there are recommendations from ETDD about kind of how we move forward with these things. So just one more time, the purpose of this is to look at the introduction and the definitions, and then evaluate the content, maybe add anything that may be missing or designate something we don't want to talk about, but there are generally pretty formalized rules around kind of what you include in these things, mostly buildings that are over 50 years old. And then at the end, there are some recommendations that we can we'll work at. Once again, just bear with me as I learn how to use this. All right. So for all the folks in the committee, you should be able to either see on your screen from an email or up on this screen just the introduction for the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 and the Register of Historic Places, and then the State Historic Preservation Office. If we remember back to when we talked about this in one of our workshops, a lot of the differences in definitions here are important for grants. They're important for how we get funding to protect things, or how we get funding to match or take care of things. And so I'm just going to read the last sentence here. It says, today the federal government regulates the identification of cultural and historical resources during any project requiring federal funding or permitting, and sanctions various historic preservation incentives for cultural resource property owners and local government. The important thing there is the federal government aspect of that. So as we scroll down here through definitions, these are quite literally factual definitions. So we are going to just roll through these as fact. I don't see a need to read any of these live, understanding that these are just definitions as defined by what they are. So I'll say the names. So we have the National Register of Historic Places, the definition of historical significance, the definition of a local historic district, what federal government incentives are and who manages them, the Historic Preservation Fund, and then the Federal Historic Tax Credit Program. So I'll pause here just for a second. Does anybody need to comment on anything this far? Slow me down if you need to, sometimes I can get rolling. All right, so then we get into the section of previous historic preservation efforts and resources, and so this becomes kind of the history of previous efforts for preservation. So below is a chronological overview of previous research discovered during the records review. Once again, this is generally factual, but what is included or what is not included in here, it's kind of we talk about history and how we tell it, what we include and what we don't include is our prerogative here. So I'd actually like to pause here and just give everybody a second to read this, because this is kind of the first part of the content that is important about what we're calling out.
Why don't you go through it, Houston?
Okay. The Tennessee Journal Commission passed legislation in 1921 providing the Tennessee SHPO, known as the Tennessee Historical Commission, authority to properly mark and preserve battlefields, houses, and other places celebrated in the history of the state. This created the Tennessee State Historic Markers Program. This program placed 2 historic markers within the city of Townsend in the 1950s. Tuckaleechee villages, paying tribute to the Cherokee settlements located along the Little River and Tuckaleechee Cove prior to 1791. The marker was replaced in 1981. And John Mitchell, recognizing the Irish Patriots' connections to Tuckaleechee Cove, with a marker replaced in 1986. A third historical marker was placed within the city of Townsend in 1998 for the Little River Lumber Company, marking the former site of the mill complex. In the 1970s, ETDD assisted with an NRHP nomination for the Little River Lumber Company's office. Unfortunately, this resource was lost to fire in 1986 and subsequently removed from the National Register of Historic Places. The Tennessee Department of Agriculture developed a bicentennial project from 1975 to 1976, honoring family farmers who maintained family land and agricultural production for a century or longer. This public program is known as the Tennessee Century Farms Program. 2 Century Farms are located within the corporate limits of the city of Townsend. The Laverne Farmer Farm, founded in 1824, and the J.L. Burns Farm, founded in 1849. In 1989, Thomas & Associates compiled a multiple property documentation form titled The Historic and Architectural Resources of Blount County, Tennessee. This cover documented provides a framework for nominating historically significant properties that share common historic context. The Blount County Historic Trust initiated the project with a countywide survey in the early 80s, obtaining a matching grant from the THC to fund the project. A second matching grant was obtained to fund the MPDF. Of the National Register of Historic Places eligible properties identified and listed in the NRHP, one is located within the Townsend corporate limits, the John F. Shea House, listed in 1989. The Tennessee Department of Transportation conducted a cultural resource assessment as required prior to any proposed undertaking by regulations set forth in the late 1990s. TDOT proposed road improvements at that time, specifically to construct additional lanes to the existing Highway 321 East Lamar Alexander Parkway through Townsend. The survey did not identify any previously unidentified resources as eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. The THC concurred with their findings. The TDOT report noted that many of the buildings constructed prior to 1940 had been destroyed, relocated, or heavily altered throughout Townsend, mostly due to previous roadway expansion to provide access to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Between 2000 and 2001, the ETDD assisted Blount County with a grant application for the TDOT Transportation Enhancement Program. The project proposed a bike trail referred to as the Shadows of the Past Historic Bike Trail, featuring 40 marked historic sites. Note the notations at the bottom are just references from the numbers here, so I'm skipping reading those. The grant was awarded, and the city of Townsend now features the Townsend Historical Trail, complete with interpretive signage and 13 historic sites along the trail, showcasing various aspects of Townsend's history. This biking trail also connects public history sites within Townsend, including the Little River Railroad and Lumber Company Museum, the Great Smoky Mountain Heritage Center, the Great Smokies Welcome Center, and the Townsend Visitor Center, as well as parks, hotels, restaurants, and other businesses. The Townsend Visitor Center offers a brochure containing a historical overview. The Tennessee Civil War National Heritage Area authored the National Heritage Area Program in Blount County, Tennessee, a feasibility study in 2005, based on the results of a community forum that emphasized a local desire for a federally designated national heritage area. According to the National Park Service, which oversees the program, national heritage areas are designed by Congress as places where natural, cultural, and historic resources combine a form of cohesion, nationally important landscapes. Through their resources, NHAs tell nationally important stories that celebrate our nation's diverse heritage. NHAs are lived-in landscapes. Consequently, NHA entities collaborate with communities to determine how to make heritage relevant to local interests and needs. The goal of the feasibility study was to provide options for Blount County that will enable the region to sustain economic development while conserving the cultural heritage, rural character, natural resources, and living landscapes that make the area unique. The Townsend Planning Commission was listed as an interested partner in the resulting document. The Townsend Archaeological Project was one of the numerous Blount County resources highlighted within the feasibility study. This was the largest archaeological field project TDOT ever performed. Archaeological evidence discovered during the project eventually inspired the creation of the Great Smoky Mountain Heritage Center, located within the city of Townsend and established in 2005. The discoveries made during the Townsend Archaeological Project represented significant developments towards preserving and sharing the Native American story of the Appalachian region. TDOT conducted another historic architecture assessment in 2024 due to the proposed transfer of maintenance of property along the right-of-way. No construction activities were proposed. This survey only considered TDOT owner property, which consisted of 4 bridges or culverts. None of these resources were determined eligible for listing in the NRHP. As the next section is all about context. Excuse me for a second, let me do this.
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair, if I could, while you're taking a break from reading all that.
Excuse me.
And we're so grateful that you're doing that. Let me just talk a little bit about this section. So my impression is that this section is very well developed. I think it is relevant to our land use inventory, and it's also, of course, related to our natural features and cultural resources in Chapter 2. So I think there is a suggestion that we would capture the bulk, if not all of this text in that section. And so I would suggest that that's probably a good thing to do, because I just don't know any other place that people would have this information available to them. I do think that as we move forward with Townsend, in terms of things that our visitors might like to visit, that our residents might like to see, and indeed do see, I think this section would be extremely valuable to have in there. One thing that I didn't see in this section, and maybe y'all can tell me if you see it in here, is I know it references as a result of the Big Dig, the Heritage Center, and of course that's definitely right to do. But there's also a collections preservation center up at the upper end, and so that's maintained by the National Park Service. I didn't see that really mentioned in here anywhere. It is something that's in Townsend. Maybe it's not historic, and maybe the rationale is that it's not per se a historical feature of Townsend, but it does house those collections. And I met several folks that have come to visit Townsend that are interested in history. And so sometimes these people will come and they will, spend a few days and do some research. You have to make an appointment there to be able to access those collections. But I've also visited other places, some of them not even in the United States, that a little bit have historical research interest. And so in terms of visitors or things that you could develop experiences for our residents, it could be this idea about, historical research. You just read, Mr. Vice Chair, that the Big Dig was actually the largest archaeological excavation that TDOT's ever done. And so that's pretty significant. It's been a while. So I wonder, what we would think about having some reference to the Collections Preservation Center up there that just, maybe it goes somewhere right along where there's a reference to the Heritage Center, and make note of the fact that this resource is right here in Townsend. There's a little paragraph about it on the Park Service website that might be a nice addition to this section. So,
Can I ask Logan to intervene here? Can you give us 5 minutes on this? I'm not aware of it. Address, who runs it, you know me, right?
Sure.
Who runs it? How do we access it? And what's in that collection that would be?
I don't know if it's going to take 5 minutes or not.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
there's two gentlemen that work over there. Bear Todd is from the National Park Service. He is the curator. And then there's also Micah Day, who is with Friends of Smokies. And so he's more of a researcher. They house a collection from 5 other national parks, including the Smokies. It is a really neat tour if you can get on their schedule to go through. But they've got artifacts as far as clothing or kitchen items or screen doors from the cabins in Cades Cove. Also other artifacts that they've found throughout from Native Americans. A lot of it is kind of when the park became the park, anything that was left behind from the folks that were picked up. But it is a state-of-the-art facility. And yeah, if you're wanting to go through, I know they schedule just public tours as well, where it's just a broad overview. But if you've got a subject in mind, if you call them, they'll pull out the available items that they have pertaining to that and help you with research.
Where exactly is it?
It's literally located right down the hill from the Heritage Center. They share a parking lot. So it's very unassuming from the outside. It's just it looks like a storage building, like metal storage building. But once you go in, I mean, it's temperature controlled, humidity controlled. There's a process for checking items in, obviously checking items out. But it's very, very stringent protocol to.
So it's like an artifact library.
Absolutely.
So checking out a book, you can kind of.
Yeah, it doesn't leave the building, but they'll bring it out to the research room.
yeah.
How do we connect this process like you discussed?
Baird Todd would be about the best person. He's like I said, the curator. He's also become the public-facing person of that. But yeah, he is a federal employee with the Park Service.
Yeah, I think, this in terms of, thinking about, what's in Townsend and, why people might want to come to live here. If you were somebody that was retired, interested in research, or if you're a world-class researcher, and my understanding is they have world-class researchers that make appointments and go to this facility. I've been in there one time, and it is quite impressive. It does have stuff from Townsend in there. I mean, it's got 5 other national parks. It's got a lot of stuff up in the park and from in the cove, but I think there's some things in there.
I think there's a Townsend connection, but not
Yeah.
necessarily Townsend itself.
Okay.
I mean, because it would be from the boundary of the park. So
Well-
wherever you want to say that line was.
Yeah, it's-
where he's,
you know, but it sits right here in Townsend. So if you've got a cultural, you know, historic sort of section in your land use transportation plan, seems like it might be something at least ought to warrant a mention.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think adding that as just a place that houses historical artifacts would be prudent. But one of the things about this section in general that I thought was, as I was reading through it, like worth noting for this group based on, if you want to call it our original purpose about the entire 3782 or the Tuckaleechee Cove, is that what I just read through was very much the corporate city limits of Townsend, right? It was very much the what's happened in the city. And while it's appropriate for the land use and transportation plan for the city of Townsend, just want to note that it does theoretically exclude anything that may have happened in Dry Valley or anything that may have happened up on the other side of the river. And so I'm not really sure, going into that or surmising about what should be added in here makes sense necessarily, but I think it's important just to put it on record as calling it out that we've gone through this process of the entire cove, as our data point, and it's where all of our data comes from, right? It's what we've talked about as being stakeholders here. But in the end, we keep coming back to all we have jurisdiction over is the city of Townsend. So, it's.
I'd also like to agree with Houston on that, and I mean, if you really want to get in the weeds, the McClung Museum at the University of Tennessee houses more artifacts pertaining to the Big Dig than the Heritage Center does. So all of the artifacts are split between the McClung Museum, the Cherokee, Museum of Cherokee over in North Carolina, and then the Heritage Center.
So I think the goal here, Mayor, is just to make sure that we have it listed in this land use.
Well, maybe you could even put it as a footnote in there. That this archive exists right inside the city limits.
Yeah. So we're not excluding.
If I may also add that
Yes.
this chapter is about historic preservation, not history. So there might be a museum that has historical artifacts in it, but the building in and of itself is not historic. So therefore, it doesn't come under the umbrella of historic preservation.
Yeah, so maybe just a footnote would be more appropriate.
Well, then that is information, I'm not sure our historic preservation plan has the wherewithal to gather the information for you. So if you have it, then you can add it yourself. I can also clearly ask it to be sure. But as I understand it, she's very strict about what historic preservation is. So something where people have in the past said, well, Lincoln slept in that bed. That doesn't make the bed necessarily historic sort of thing. So
That's a fair point.
there's a strict parameter or a more choice definition of what constitutes as historic preservation as against history or whatever else.
Definition. So it's been call it a practice over the years to relocate like cabins and full buildings. How does that affect the historic preservation designation? Does it need to be an original location to fall under that definition?
Yes, don't quote me, but I've heard her say several times that once you move a building, it's no longer historic.
That's how she answered me when she was here a couple of months ago.
Cool. All right. All right. So are we good?
Yeah.
I'll go forward.
Okay, so this is about a single page long of just Townsend historic context. So I will once again read this, and we can, talk about any other context that may or may not need to be in here. So the city of Townsend is situated within the Tuckaleechee Cove at the base of the Smoky Mountains. The Little River travels through the cove and has supported human habitation for millennia. Archaeological research has revealed that the Native Americans traveled through this region since at least 2000 BC, and evidence of permanent settlements date back to approximately 1200 AD. The Cherokee established multiple villages along the Little River and the Tuckaleechee Cove, supporting a large population in the 1600s and 1700s. This pre-contact history is explored at the Great Smoky Mountains Heritage Center, where artifacts discovered during the Townsend Archaeological Project, 1999-2002, are exhibited. European Americans arrived in the late 1700s after the Cherokee had abandoned their villages along the Little River. Blount County formed from Knox County in 1795. However, Tuckaleechee Cove would not be legitimately settled until later that decade. Despite this, settlers arrived in Tuckaleechee Cove in the 1790s, as evidenced by Myers Cemetery. located on the south side of East Lamar Alexander Parkway, marked with a sign reading, founded in 1795, oldest burial ground in Toccolecci Cove. Graves at Myers Cemetery date back to at least 1797. Records suggest at least 12 families inhabited Toccolecci Cove by 1800. One of the first settlers, John Walker, constructed a mill on the Little River in the 1790s. Churches formed beginning in 1802 and a post office established in 1833. The location along the Little River inspired the development of grist mills, sawmills, and cotton gins. By 1869, records indicate almost 100 families inhabited Toccolecci Cove. The lumber industry, amplified through the second half of the 1800s, propelled by the invention of the bandsaw and the logging railroads. By the 1880s, in 1900, Colonel W.B. Townsend purchased approximately 86,000 acres of land, including land within Toccolecci Cove. Colonel Townsend established the Little River Lumber Company in 1901. The company became one of the most successful commercial logging operations in southern Appalachia. Toccolecci Cove was renamed Townsend after Colonel W.B. Townsend in 1902. To facilitate the transportation of the lumber product, Colonel Townsend developed a railroad from Marable to the neighboring community of Walland in 1902, and the railroad extended into Townsend by 1903. The section of railroad tracks connecting Marable to Townsend and further east into the logging communities of Tremont and Elkmont became known as the Little River Railroad. The Little River Lumber Company constructed houses for their workers, predominantly located between the Little River and the Little River Railroad tracks. The company also constructed an office building, depot, company store, and church and parsonages. The federal government purchased thousands of acres of the Little River Lumber Company's land in 1927 during their preparations to develop the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Due to this purchase, coupled with the removal of the vast majority of trees in the previous decades, the Little River Lumber Company ceased operations in 1938. By 1941, the major Little River Lumber Company resources, the railroad and the sawmill, were removed. The National Park Service created an entrance to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park at Townsend, and the park was formally dedicated. The closure of the Little River Lumber Company and the opening of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park just before World War II quickly shifted Townsend from a logging town to a tourist hub. Before and after the war, roadways were improved through the region to support the growing amount of automobile traffic. During this time, dozens of Little River Lumber Company's buildings were demolished and some were relocated. As was common in the 1950s, during the post-war boom and popularization of automobile travel, several commercial establishments catering to tourism were developed along the new roadways, which would continue through the 1960s and 70s. Townsend became more popular as a tourist destination and gateway to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, earning the moniker Peaceful Side of the Smokies, by comparison to the other Tennessee entrance to the park at Gatlinburg. The construction of commercial buildings, short-term lodging, and other amenities catering to tourists continues to this day as Townsend relies on tourism, the biggest industry for the area. All right, so that's the historical context. The next section is about cultural resources assessment. As you can see listed at the top, it's broken into 3 sections here with European American Settlement, Little River Lumber Company, and the National Park Tourism Area, through those 3 different time frames, with the Little River Lumber Company having, arguably the shortest time frame if you consider the fact that the National Park Tourism Area has to end 50 years ago. As I understand it, for this to be talked about in a historical context, that's our marker. It's 50 years ago, counts as historical. All right. The European American settlement period, 1795 through 1900. There are approximately 10 resources dating to the European American settlement period within Townsend corporate limits, the majority of which are private residences, some of which are farmsteads with outbuildings. Little River Lumber Company era, 1901 through 1938. There are approximately 25 resources dating to the Little River Lumber Company era within Townsend corporate limits, less than half of which are believed to have been constructed by the Little River Lumber Company. While resources constructed during this building campaign are not necessarily related to or constructed by the Little River Lumber Company, the operation of the lumber company during this time was inevitably a primary factor propelling growth. National Park Tourism Area. There are over 100 resources dating to the National Park Tourism Area within Townsend corporate limits, over half of which are residential. Many of these resources are commercial, most notably several overnight lodging accommodations developed to support the growing tourism industry. A chart inventorying select cultural resources follows. All right, so this next list here is, again, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but is basically a list of books or resources of research material or source material that like essentially has been cited or in this document already, or is like a good resource through which anybody can go and research for themselves the history of Townsend, for the last 220 years or so. So I'm not going to read all these, but as a note here, just being included at the end of chapter 2 as cultural resources that are able to be reviewed.
So basically, these will be the endnotes, the other ones will be the footnotes.
Right. All right, and so let's call this the fun part. So we've gone through the documenting what historical items exist here in Townsend, and now we get to the chapter 6, which is the implementation methods, and where we can talk about recommendations and strategy for those things. And Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong as well, but this is the section where like our input actually matters.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
So we're going to go through each of these, and I'm not sure if getting an immediate reaction to these is possible. We can read it and see if anything comes up right away, or if we can get a full conversation on it. But these are the things that actually end up guiding what we do as a town, to the planning commission, and then to the city commission, into how we add more zoning and zoning codes or more codes enforcement. So, all right, let's jump right into it. Recommendation: define desired Townsend aesthetic. State community goals to protect cultural resources, control development, and define a desired aesthetic. Historic Resource Survey identified numerous properties exhibiting the National Park Service rustic style, known colloquially as parkitecture. These resources feature details meant to mimic the buildings located within the neighboring Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Buildings exhibiting this style were often designed to blend into the natural landscapes and be less obtrusive. Specific features include stone cladding, wood accents, and board and batten cladding. A design review board can exercise control over development in a defined zone by adopting design guidelines and reviewing all conceptual plans for new construction, alteration, repair, rehabilitation, and relocation or demolition of any building within the defined zone for compliance with those design guidelines. So, if this recommendation were to be approved, if you will, strategy: establish a design review board by local ordinance. Identify the target zone for design review, draft and adopt design guidelines, involve current property owners, and make a plan to inform future property owners. So I'm going to stop there, and the basic topic of this is do we believe that the land use and transportation plan should have a recommendation in it that states that we are in favor of, as a city, adopting a design review board in the entire city, in a certain area, or at any, on any smaller location. Does anybody want to start with that, that topic?
Yeah, well, Mr. Vice Chair, I'm happy to recall that the current land use and transportation plan suggests a design review board. Was never implemented recommendation, but I continue to think that this type of recommendation would be beneficial for Townsend. We've heard from our residents that they like the fact that Townsend doesn't look like other places, that it has its own unique sort of appeal. If we're seeking to design our aesthetic, I think think it's useful to do that, number one, because it's why people want to come to live here, to visit here. If somebody blindfolded you and drove you down to South Carolina and took that blindfold off at Hilton Head, and you looked around, you would know you were in Hilton Head. There are some distinctive features about that community that just by looking around, you know where you are. It's a unique thing. And if you think about people that are, planning a visit or maybe planning to relocate there, that aesthetic is really important. It's important to their identity. The peaceful side of the Smokies is something that we have sought to try to define in different ways from time to time. But it is something that I hear, from our residents and business owners alike, that makes us unique and special. And so I think a design review board recommendation would be entirely appropriate. Doesn't mean that it will ever happen, but in terms of looking ahead and including it in the plan, it was appropriate, 10, 15 years ago. I think it's still appropriate to have that recommendation in the plan. This one has a little bit more detail about it than what's in our current plan. I think that's helpful too. I've never seen this word architecture before, but it's well explained here and it gets to the idea. And I've seen, certain businesses and things try to emulate some of those same characteristics. If we just had a little more uniformity around it, we'd already have something. When our businesses, put stuff in place, they don't have a lot of guidance, but it seems like they're already starting to do this. If you look at the visitor center, all those investments up there that they made, it has this type of aesthetic. You look at the Heritage Center, it has that type of aesthetic. Little River Railroad and Lumber Company Museum, sort of has that aesthetic to it. So I don't think we're very far off from this, but it seems like it would be a useful thing to have.
I would also like to agree with you on that. I think you could also add metal roof in somewhere in the conceptual of the new builds. But I think this is how you avoid having that upside down mansion in the middle of the strip, or Broadway Towers downtown Maryville when everything else is cute and has character, and you have the 1970s building. So I think this is how you get around that.
And also, in my thoughts, we don't want to make it so strict if we ever adopt it, that someone can't just build their home here because they can't afford to keep up with our requirements, or a business wouldn't be able to come in because we're so strict, it just wouldn't be feasible. So we kind of got to make a middle of the road kind of decision once it comes into be, if it does come into be. I think.
So does this language tackle what we needed to tackle? It's carryover from the previous document. Is there, it's probably verbatim, other than the content up above. But did the previous document say review board by local ordinance? Does that mean that the commission, the planning commission or the city commission has to create a local ordinance?
Well, I think that's what that means, is the Tennessee Code annotated allows for something like this to happen by a local ordinance. So I think this is a little more detailed than what's in there currently. But it doesn't set the standards. That would be a matter for another time. But it just says that, if you want to keep it looking like it looks, generally speaking, this would be useful.
Thank you.
Yeah, also, typically, or not typically, but some jurisdictions elect to just have a design review process for commercial buildings, non-residential buildings. And then others also have a historic district where you were trying to keep that character of the entire district. But if somebody was to come and build a new home in a subdivision, then that person may not necessarily be required to meet those standards.
And even others have if it's 150 feet off the road, it doesn't require the same thing versus your frontage and all that stuff. So I think at this point, as long as, knowing that we can't get into the details of exactly what this is, like, I feel like design review board for a small town is appropriate. I think we've heard from at least 4 or 5 people here, so I'm going to move on. knowing that what we know, this looks fine, barring any sort of review that we're not expecting right now. So the next section is just code enforcement for chapter 6. A recommendation is incentivize the preservation and adaptive reuse of the existing built environment over new construction. I have one comment on this, because if you guys remember back, it may have been a year ago, maybe 7 months ago, Mr. Talley came in here, and one of the things that stuck with me that he said was, all I've been hearing the last 5 years is restriction, but nothing about incentivizing. And one of the things I like about this is that it starts with the word incentivize. And so if we're going to, preserve or adapt or reuse or whatever our existing buildings, no matter the state of them, is it feasible for the city to incentivize that? And I'm not sure it is necessarily, but that's not necessarily for us to define here. I think as we look at the best and highest use of our buildings, if we can incentivize reuse, it is good for all of us.
Yeah, I like it. There's a variety of ways that you could incentivize. So,
Okay, moving on. Chapter 6, growth management section. Recommendation, incentivize maintaining agricultural parcels such as the Century Farms, Laverne Farmer Farm, CA 1824, is only partially located within city limits but maintains its agricultural character. J.L. Burns Farm has already been subdivided and developed, with further development occurring at present. While still in its infancy, Tennessee recently passed the Farmland Preservation Act, designed to assist farmers who wish to protect their land through permanent conservation easements. Strategy: consider adopting easements and/or deed restrictions to maintain agricultural parcels.
Let me ask a quick question. Was that, Mayor, maybe you can recall this without looking at the old document. Does the old document have that bottom line that says strategy in it? Do you have that where you can?
Hey, while you're looking for that, I'm just going to add this here. So, I may not get this name exactly right, but I believe we have like a Smoky Mountain Land Preservation or Blount County. Let's say.
Foothills Land Conservancy.
I have used, as I've been doing this research and looking at, I haven't seen something in the easement or deed restrictions based in the city of Townsend. They're almost always county related or even state related. That's not my field. That's what I've seen before, whether it's in a big city or in a state. So, does anybody have any context on that from your personal experience on either neighbors or friends who may have put their land into easements or into conservation? I know that Tremont, their second campus, which is technically in the county, had land that came from I think it was the Johnson family based here that put it into an easement before they bought it, and so that it could never be developed. That's about all I know on this.
I have never donated or been a part of any of that. I do know that they do educational meetings where they're trying to get the word out, so people do. And one of them just made the news not terribly long ago. About a very large parcel of land that they've now turned into a park in
Yes,
Maryville.
yeah. There.
I can find out some contact information and we can reach out to them at a later time if you'd like to.
I mean, once again, I think the question is less about the details here and more about whether or not we believe the approach to suggesting this is appropriate.
I would just offer, Mr. Vice Chair, Foothills Land Conservancy has hosted different events within the city. There are a number of folks that have parcels within the city that might be interested in doing something like this. Sometimes they don't have to be great big giant parcels, but it does help preserve the open green space and things for people where that makes sense. It's voluntary, and so it's not a requirement. Here it says incentive. Typically, the incentives are around taxes. And so the county charges taxes, but we don't currently have a property tax in the city of Townsend, and I hope we never will. But to the extent that what that incentive might consist of, there are a variety of ways that the city could potentially incentivize it. Probably, you know, we don't have one of the biggest ways that's commonly used, and that would be an abatement or some sort of something on property tax. But if we ever did, we could do that. Or if we came up with some other type of incentive, you know, that would be appropriate, we could do that. But I think we did hear in our survey that people liked the idea of potentially being able to preserve some of the green spaces. Right now, we have quite a lot of what is essentially vacant land, and if even some of those parcels, you know, were put in an easement like that, you would be able to have a view shed on up to the mountains. I mean, that's one of the nicest things about what Laverne Farmer did, is you can look right on up and see the mountains. It's a pretty view.
We don't want to forget the fact that people have over the years, since Townsend was created, invested in the community, invested in this property on the highway with the idea that we are a tourism-based community, and the opportunity there for their whatevers, they could voluntarily change their mind and not want to develop it commercially.
Yeah.
But you don't want to, unless you're ready to buy their land, we can't go too far with that.
One of the thoughts I had here about, like, as it relates to, just call it property value or cost of living here in town, is that it is the more undeveloped land in the city of limits that does get added to preservation or a non-development technically does restrict the future use of housing and the future availability of housing. So, I've said this before on this committee that I don't think the city of Townsend and just its size can do much when it comes to affordable housing, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that we should ignore the policies that are going towards it. So, anyway, so that's just a comment there. But do you guys think that we should add like the Foothills Conservancy by name in here as like a partner of the city? Is that a thing, or do we just leave it out and kind of say that the planning commission that's their responsibility as we move forward?
Yeah, so I think we have to reference what exists in our world. Don't forget that this is a document that could be read 10 years from today, and even ETD has a different name, had a different name then.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me do say though that in chapter 6, moving forward, anytime you see strategy underlined, it's not in the original document.
Okay.
It was incorporated in the paragraph.
Well, do y'all want to talk about that for a second? I mean, you want to talk about that format? This is the, in some instances, like the first time we're discussing recommendation and then strategy as being a part of chapter 6. Not to derail this document, but we're looking at about 12 minutes. It's been a long day here at City Hall for you guys. We have a long, a commission meeting ahead of us. I'm going to be cognizant about time in this document, but this doesn't bother me, recommendation and strategy, but I also don't know if there might be a legal reason why we can't put strategy in there. I really have no context here, but it seems like a reasonable approach.
Well, all I would say is that the final placement of this content will be up to you to do. We are not stressing that it should be a new formatting strategy. We're just giving you the information, the content, and then you can give the person, as I mentioned the last time, the person who's holding the pen, and choose to script it however which way they choose.
So I say, co-chair, that we can leave those strategy lines in there, and when we go to final review or context, if that's incorporated into a sentence that doesn't say, consider doing this, or doesn't make up a motion, but it references the fact that whatever the point is and whatever paragraph we need to give. I think when this document goes to final review and massaging, I guess, I personally don't want to see recommendations in there. I want to see it in the context of the document. And that's just my opinion. I'm trying to look at what's the reader 10 years from now going to look at? And why are they who are we to make all these recommendations and then not just incorporate it into a language that creates the ability of the planning or the city commission take action.
All right, I'm gonna fly through this last page. So I'm on page 10 of 11, everybody. You can see it. But so I'm actually gonna read, these are all under cultural resources section here. So I'm gonna read the first two you can see on here. Recommendation, generate a historic preservation plan to create an agenda for future preservation activities and establish goals. Townsend retains numerous mid-century resources constructed to capture the peaceful side of the Smokies motif, exhibited by stone or wood accents on many of these commercial resources. Over time, the adoption of historic overlay zoning in the form of a local historic district may become more relevant in Townsend as resources dating to the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s approach the 50-year threshold, typically considered in historic preservation practice. The Design Review Board target zone, recommendation 1, may inform future historic zoning overlay. Strategy, establish a focus area for future historic zoning overlay. Okay, going to the next recommendation. Hire a consultant firm to generate a formal historic preservation plan to address and plan for historic preservation goals. An HPP can be customized to suit the needs of the municipality, but often includes a historic resources survey and would expand upon the historic preservation goals, strategies, opportunities, and incentives outlined in this chapter. Strategy, identify historic preservation goals in a geographical focus area. Apply for the Historic Preservation Fund Matching Grant Program to the Historical Tennessee Commission National Park Service to fund the HPP. So the first recommendation, adoption of historic zoning overlay zoning based on a local historic district. Second one, create a more formal historic preservation plan. Moving on to the next recommendation. Pursue the National Heritage Area status in collaboration with Blount County, the National Park Service, and potentially other stakeholders such as the Great Smoky Mountain Convention and Visitor Bureau, Blount County Chamber of Commerce, Keep Blount Beautiful, Foothills Land Conservancy, Little River Watershed Association, Blount County Historical Society, Sam Houston Schoolhouse Museum, City of Maryville, City of Alcoa, Town of Friendsville, Blount County Government, among others. Strategy. Thoroughly review and comment upon recommendations made in TN Civil War National Heritage Areas, the National Heritage Area Program in Blount County, Tennessee, a feasibility study. Identify other potential project partners that may have been established in the last 20 years since the creation of the above-mentioned document. In collaboration with Blount County and other interested parties, request a cost proposal to update the above-mentioned document from the TN Civil War NHS. Recommendation, encourage and/or pursue additional NRHP listings for resources located within the Townsend corporate limits. Listing in the NRHP opens resources up for historic preservation incentives for capital projects, such as the Historic Preservation Fund and the Federal Historic Tax Credit Program. The MPDF discussed in Chapter 2 provided a framework for nominating historically significant properties that share common historical context. The MPDF provided contextual categories and the basis for evaluating the historical significance of properties that share a common theme and or physical characteristics. These categories were antebellum residential architecture from the settlement and post-settlement period, residential architecture, industrial and commercial buildings from industrial buildings and commercial buildings, religious, educational, and public buildings, and cantilevered log barns. In addition to the above list, the Department of Agriculture 1975 to 1976 Century Farms program also supports NRHP nominations of eligible century farms, such as the Laverne Farmer Farm. Strategy. Property owners, educate property owners, encourage property owners to secure a determination of eligibility from the SHPO, utilize the Historic Preservation Fund Matching Grant Program for the Tennessee Historical Commission National Park Service, to fund hiring a consultant to compile the NRHP nominations. All right, that's the end of this document. I just flew through kind of the last few of these recommendations and strategies that fall under the cultural resources section. And as I just reflected on these, the main thing that I see here is like, is this a priority? You know, is this something that we prioritize as a town, and is this something that needs to be in here? And everything we heard over the last year and a half has basically been yes. And so, look, having this sort of thing in here, just like the mayor had said earlier, we've had a design review board in the land use and transportation plan recommendations for the last 15 years, and we still don't have one. Adding these in here does not mean we're going to do it, but it gives clear guidance that this is something that we heard was important from our community and from our stakeholders over the last 18 months. That's my take on this. These specific things are out of my league, to be honest, and so does anybody else have any thoughts on whether or not we need to refine these or keep them or remove them or anything like that at this time?
Well, I think the original goal was springboarding off the 2010, 2020 document and keeping the content similar. But even if it was in the old document and it's in the new document, tomorrow's a new day for Townsend. 5 years is a new day for Townsend. So we'll get to the point. I think it is our responsibility to carry the water, as I say, through our committee onto what Townsend will become. So I am very much so. It's always good to have content in there to reflect this time of, this won't be done, we won't have this public opinion that we've had with the consultants and the time at the Heritage Center and all these times. This might not come about for another 10 years. So I think fully taking advantage of the time and the efforts that the consultants have gone through and this committee has gone through should be planted in this. Even if it's a little too complex or complicated per se, I would rather have it in there and them know that they see this committee as well. They were serious at this time to have it in there. That's my 2 cents worth.
I think it shows that we've listened to the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it also leaves the door open for, the next person to come around and be like, hey, this has been recommended for 15 years now. Why don't we actually make some action on it?
Yeah.
And it gives them the leeway to be able to do that. So I think this shows a faith in the community of listening and being heard. On what
I
their
think that was
priorities
the
are.
original goal, Logan, was to listen to the people and make sure this document reflects what the people are asking.
Absolutely.
And Mr. Chair, I want to just add, so I put one more document on the screen behind you, and it's the actual list of natural features and cultural resources that were identified as structures or places of cultural significance that were built more than 50 years ago. If you look at the top there, you can see the Myers Cemetery, which was referenced in the last things that I read as the first thing built, 1795, and then all the way up to 1972, the Tremont Lodge and Resort. Everything in between there. Summer, you can see the dam in there, the different dance hall, the resort, swinging bridge. These are not just structures with 4 walls and a roof. They're things of cultural significance in town. So I think what we do with this list is pretty simple. Those things that are on there are accurate, and those things are a comprehensive list of what our I'm forgetting her name, the one that came in to talk to us. Audrey, thank you. What she compiled based on her research. And so, unless any of you guys, and maybe y'all have some historical context here, have anything else to add here, this is basically our comprehensive list that we'll be adding in here. So, really, by next meeting, if we don't add to this, we're not really revisiting this necessarily, until we go to publish.
Question, the dance hall is where? What building is the
Hold on.
dance hall?
I'll tell you.
The what?
Doug Leach building.
No.
Nagarnal, the
Oh, okay.
big one with all the trees growing out now.
That it's fine.
I did have one question, maybe a question for Audrey. I don't know how much of a building you have to have left to have a historic remnant, but there's quite a few remnants in the river of the Lawson's Mill. And so I would ask her if that one could be added, because there was a very nice sign down there that had a history of the mill and some pictures, and people could still look into the river and get an idea of where that was. So that'd be the only one that I would
Yeah,
recommend.
Fred Lawson, who owned that property for a long time, Sue's cousin. did a great job. Actually, that is, you guys know, I think he had Lee Roberson, commissioned Lee Roberson to do that painting. And only family members have it. Unfortunately, we don't have a copy of it. But that was very nice of him to do that. And I think if you kind of made your way up through there, I think there's a lot on that old road that, I mean, there's a store there's a lot of old buildings. I would love to, and maybe Dawn knows, to walk into the Little River Lumber Company and see what Townsend looked like in a map form, in 1930 or 1928 or something. The museum has that? Yeah, see, I just have to pay more attention.
The one thing that's overlooked, it may be impossible, but the old Little River Light and Power Company foundations are there at the river's edge.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
tell the story ghostly manner, but it's.
So that was the mill.
This
Or
is a different one than I was
It's
mentioning.
not the mill, but
No,
not
what you're
right
saying
now.
is different,
It's
yeah.
not listed on this.
No, but that might be one to add too, because you can still see some stuff in the river.
Yes,
Little River Light and Power.
like
Little River
that.
Light.
So that's the Lawson property and the Little River Light and Power to add to the investigation list, for adding to the list. So we'll need, an approximate address for that and a few other, notice of ownership and such. All right, so, Mr. Chairman, that basically concludes my section that you had pushed me for number 4 here, review your consultant submissions. So I'll give it back to you.
Okay,
for our next
well,
step.
we are gaining documents every day. I'm sure we'll have some more to review. We have discussed in previous meetings that as the consultants do their work, we'll start receiving emails and documents from them to review. So I appreciate everybody here on this committee hanging in, Co-Chair Oldham for kind of taking the lead on reviewing these documents and bringing certain things to light. I appreciate all the committee's input, everybody, all the time. It's just, what a great committee. We're very, very fortunate. At this time, I would like to, just a few minutes left here, see if anybody in the audience has any comments or questions or moving forward, committee, anything that we need to add, subtract. Hopefully next month we can catch up on our regular business with the meetings,
Yes.
and minutes.
It's kind of, the list faded somewhat,
Yeah, I'll leave it over all the time.
but I don't think I see it. There's a log building right at the mouth of Black Mash Road.
Yeah, Black Ash Road, okay.
I think Joey Emmer owns it now. I think that was an
Yeah,
Emmer
right.
house.
Yeah, correct.
Is it on there?
It's not, no, but that's the Emmer property, Black Mash Road, the cabin there at the bottom of it.
Yes, right starting up through there.
I'm just repeating back to it because I've got a note taker going and it's just going to capture it when I say it.
And I heard you comment before about the company houses. The company houses were basically surrounding the mill site. They were more on this side of the site than it was along the river. There was several along the riverside, but they were more over here, even up where you live, on Mountain Avenue. Yeah.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the house that's a historic house now, sat right over here
And
somewhere.
That's another thing.
Yeah.
Since you all started this project about this historical buildings, I never knew that was the John Shea house. Is that what you say it is?
Yeah, that's what it says up there, because it's actually Townsend's brother, wasn't it?
It was always, I heard George Townsend house.
It was George Townsend's.
Now, where we own the store building down there was a house set there, and the sister house to it,
Mhm.
which was moved over along the river and tore down about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago.
Mhm.
that's set on properties that belong to the Shea Brothers.
Mm,
And I think they got this confused.
we should look into that, make sure.
Because if you're going to document this, it should be right.
So we need to look into the documentation of the Shea House on the piece of land that's currently on and whether or not that's the George Townsend house and which one the Shea Brothers property would have been on.
It would have been,
Yeah, the Lawson property down there.
There's a plaque, there's a town plaque that there's lots
Mhm.
where Son Stephen's store is.
Yeah,
And the lot, it was just south of that, which is in the right of way now.
Mhm.
Records say that the Shea Brothers own
Okay. Well, I think we have some work to do. We have taken care of some work tonight. I have a lot of notes. I know we have a note taker going, taking notes. Input? Ken, any final thoughts?
And
Okay. John, Sandy, pretty good over here. Mayor, any final thoughts?
Good meeting.
A lot of work. We will, unless specified, we will see everybody.
Logan, any final thoughts?
I was just gonna say that,
I just gotta skip.
yeah, that's fine. That Don is gonna do a history walkthrough, the 27th, is that correct? At the museum?
On town tour 27.
I saw it on Facebook. I was
Yeah.
very intrigued. I have to work that day sadly, but I'm very intrigued because I'd love to hear your stories.
I got it. He did one for us on a
I'll
while.
give you a private tour or anything.
No.
Sounds good.
All right, all hearts and minds clear. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for coming out.
Encourage you all to stick around, we're gonna have a mingle.